You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Imagine you walk into a space. It's a dark, empty space, but there's a spotlight on a giant metal sculpture. It's like 3 stories high, towering over you. You press a button, and all of a sudden, that giant metal figure starts to shake, and you hear a sound, an overwhelming sound, as thousands of bells ring out. That is the immersive experience created by Charuvi Agrawal and her record-setting sculpture, 26,000 Bells of Hanuman.
I feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art it? Mr. Wood art Ed me.
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted, where we explore visual arts in an audio medium. I'm your host, Kyle Wood, and joining me today is one of my oldest friends, Anders Van Marder. Thanks for joining me.
Hey Kyle, how's it going?
I'm so happy that I could have you for this, because not just because you are the reason that I am, where I am. You are one of the people who said, you're kind of a terrible musician, but you're adequate at painting. You know it's true.
That. No, you're good at both. You're really good at both.
But you and Colleen literally dragged me to the Art Institute, and I will be forever grateful for that. But also for this particular one, I appreciate having not only an accomplished musician but sound engineer to talk about a sound sculpture, because a lot of people think of visual arts, as just something to look at, but this engages all the senses.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. When you told me about this idea, I got really curious about this artist, and I started watching some of her stuff online, and I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
It's amazing stuff, isn't it?
It's so cool. It's so cool, and it's so different, and I'm excited to talk about all the different pieces of it.
Yeah, so I always want to start off with a little bit of the background. So Charuvi Agrawal, she was born in 1983. It was a good year for making people. That's when I was born, too. And I guess her dad worked in aviation, so it seems like she kind of grew up traveling around India. And she works in different disciplines. I remember one of my art teachers lamenting the fact that artists sort of get pigeonholed because they make their career by becoming identifiable with one certain thing. And it kind of reminded me of I saw an interview, I think it was Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, talking about how it's kind of a bummer for him to record a new album because he knows that 90% of the songs he records, he will never play again once they get out of the studio, because they have to play the hits,
Yeah.
and you only have so much room. And, and in the visual arts, a lot of times an artist becomes known for one certain specific style, and it's they just got to keep doing that. Jackson Pollock's got to keep dripping.
Right.
And Charuvi Agrawal, she doesn't get into that box. She paints, she sculpts, she animates, she's a filmmaker. She's doing lots of different stuff and bringing lots of different stuff together, which I thought was really awesome.
Yeah. Her being a multidisciplinary artist is it's so cool for so many reasons, but she excels at all of those specifics that you just mentioned, which is really noteworthy. For a lot of artists, we do have to stick to a particular medium or a particular instrument, and she's so talented and disciplined that she does all of them and really well, which is unusual.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, is that, she's not just dabbling in a bunch of things, she's excelling in a bunch of different media. And she showed that propensity for arts from a young age. As I was reading about her, one of the first stories I read that I just gravitated towards immediately was just she talked about it almost sounded like a trauma of like, you know, an art teacher saying like when she was in year 6 or something like that, she made a self-portrait and they said, that's too sophisticated for you. They threw it away and made her make another one. Which
Wow.
I know. Luckily, like that didn't stop her. She had that persistence. She felt that drive and she kept making things. And I believe that one, even later on, like she scavenged it and like put it into a competition and it became like an award-winning piece for, you know, her age group in some sort of competition. And she's earned lots of recognitions. Like aside from like the standard validation that comes from like she got her BFA from the College of Arts New Delhi and she got a master's degree from the Sheridan Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning in Canada, which who knew Canada has, you know, like schools that go beyond Degrassi, but
Canada
just
has
joking.
amazing schools. They do. Yeah, no, she's academically accomplished, and then she's accomplished in her industry as well. I mean, she's a powerhouse.
Yeah, and while she was earning that master's in computer animation, like she started working on films like student films that started to get a little bit of recognition. Like she started to produce things that made the rounds on sort of like the film festival circuit. So like the 10th Avatar was the piece that started to build a little bit of a reputation for her. And so after she graduated from that program, she got this offer to do a 3D animated film on the Hindu god of Hanuman. And she was a little bit leery of it because on the one hand, like it was a ton of money. It was a huge payday. But on the other hand, the promoter had kind of a dodgy reputation and she was worried like she was not, like the funding would not come through in the end. She decided to take that gamble and she started CDL, Charuvi Design Labs. And so in 2009, she started that studio hiring like 30 animators. And they worked on 2D, 3D animations, visual effects, art installations, like virtual reality and augmented reality, and just like cross-disciplinary work in creative fields. But the big thing was that Hanuman animation, because like she spent 3 years producing that. And I think, as you can imagine, if you spend 3 years on one certain topic, you either love it or you hate it.
Yes.
You know?
Very true. Very true.
Like it is either a passion that you want to keep pursuing or it is something you never want to see again when you're done. And you know, she, I guess, really became devoted to Hanuman. And this is the part where I'm going to uncomfortably acknowledge that I don't want to speak too much about religion as a public school educator and all of that sort of stuff. But I think it is worth understanding a little bit about Hinduism. And, you know, Hinduism is a polytheistic religion, and Hanuman is one of the deities. He is considered to be one of, I think it's 8 immortals in that religion. And Hanuman is one of the most popular deities in that that many people are devoted to because of his virtues. Hanuman is seen as very much sort of an ideal figure because of, like, Hanuman is a companion to the god Rama, and it's very loyal, very like strong, brave, and, you know, just like really nobody could find fault with him. So he's associated with meditation, scholarship, strength, devotion, self-control, faith, service to a cause. Like all of those sort of virtuous ideals are in Hanuman. And she obviously was taken with that story and devotion to Hanuman, and that later served as the inspiration to keep going beyond that 3D animated piece, because the installation I described earlier, the 26,000 bells, which also earned her recognition because that was a record-setting piece in the Limca Book of World Records. That is a sculpture of Hanuman. So, shall we do a little bit of a deeper dive into that specific sculpture.
Let's do it.
So I guess I always like to start off with just like, what's jumping out to you? What do you notice about this piece?
Oh my gosh. There's so many things. It's sort of if I pull back from this piece and just think about art itself, how other people are experiencing it, what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, what they're sensing. This piece, I immediately noticed that anyone could have an interaction with it. It, like you said, it's a theistic form of art, or art form rather. Depending on the different, senses that you're able to engage. If you can't see, you can still hear this piece. If you can't hear, you can see the piece. There's an element of touching that's involved. So, I mean, she's so brilliant in that she created something that like almost anyone can engage with. And so I think that's the thing that I'm just like, you look at it and it's very beautiful, but it's also like, wow, this is really a piece of art for like everyone. And that's the thing that I'm just like, this paintings are beautiful and they can be so engaging. Music, it's so beautiful and so engaging, but those are still, separate kind of dimensions. And she brings that together. And I think that is just, it's stunning.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and the openness to interpretation for everybody. Like, I know I've seen Agrawal talking in like a TEDx type of situation, and she talks about how with art, it's open to so many different interpretations, and that's what she loves about the creative mindset, is that everybody will see the same stimulus and have a different reaction. And with this, she's doing a lot of things that are really interesting because there's so much specificity to it. Like the bell being sort of symbolic, because the bell has real significance in the Hindu tradition. Typically, you would ring a bell when entering into a Hindu temple to make the deity aware of your presence, but also to sort of like the ringing of the bell. It blocks out other things. The sound sort of clears your mind. It gets you focused and into that proper mind space. So the bells as the specific object that's used to make this has that meaning, but it also has just that sensory experience that even if you're not aware of the tradition and the symbolic importance of the bell, it still just looks and sounds cool. It is still just a shiny metal object that grabs our attention. We see that sculpture that, to those in the know, it is Hanuman, and to those who are just coming to this for the first time and don't have that background, it is just a large looming presence. It's 25 feet tall. It is recognizable as a figure of some sort, even if you don't know who specifically it is. And what I find really interesting also, just in terms of the aesthetics, is the way that the strings the bells are hanging from also sort of come together in this piece to alter the visual. It looks like it almost helps to keep that spotlight on him, or it almost looks like something that's like raining down, like showering down. There's this shimmering to the strings as well, which I find interesting.
Yeah, that is something to me that also really stands out. The whole form of the sculpture is so masterfully executed that even the sort of mechanical pieces of it, she's not hiding them. It's in full view, and even that is beautiful. And like you said, it has this like shimmering aspect to it, almost like rain that's like coming down. It's really so cool how she was able to incorporate the bells and the mechanics that hold them together into this really seamless piece. Again, just really masterful execution.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of this, or what is the thing that stands out most to you?
I think to me what's really interesting about it, and what takes it to a whole other level, is the fact that, I had my immediate reaction when I first saw that sculpture. Like when I first saw documentation of it, and you see like the scale of it, and it just looks cool visually. And then every time I've looked at it and read about it or seen video of it in action and things like that, it's more to discover. You know, there's so many layers to it that like every time I investigate more, it's just like, oh wow, I see what you did there, and that was really clever because of, you know, the sound of the bell and the connection to Om and the spiritual significance of that, and you know, like just all of those things coming together, I think is really, really interesting. And also because, as I've said, we often think of the visual arts as distinctly visual and this sort of static object. And the idea that even something that is so massive, 25 feet tall, you press a button. There's like it's like I think there's this pedestal that has like feet, like you press down, and then it activates this movement that is like this giant comes to life. It is kinetic. There's literal movement to it that sends ripples down the sculpture, but also the air around it as the sound waves come out and envelop you. And I just think that is so powerful and awesome that she's creating these experiences that transcend visual arts and incorporate all the senses. Like that's what a good installation does to me, is it creates this immersive experience that transforms the space.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of times, you know, I'm not a visual artist, but I feel like, you know, in speaking with you and some other visual artists, or visiting galleries or museums or talking to people that have installed installations, you know, often the space that the piece is in, it may or may not impact the sort of total impact of what you're seeing. But what's interesting about her piece is that absolutely the setting is going to impact what you see and hear with this piece for a number of reasons. You know, if the piece is outside, you know, there's wind, which will change the sound. In general, the acoustics of an indoor versus outdoor venue are going to be different. So there's a sort of, you know, she can use those elements to change the experience of what people are, you know, seeing or hearing or feeling. So I feel like, I mean, I really just think this artist is so brilliant for like all the reasons we've discussed, and that, you know, like you said, you go back to this piece and every time you look at it or think about it, there's something new that you're learning. And I really wonder for her, like, how she was able to bucket all these different variables when making this piece. It's such a testament to how smart this person is, that, you know, they've accounted for these different things, and to truly be a multimedia artist, you have to be thinking about that. So it's like, it's such a complex piece, but it's just hitting on so many cool things.
Yeah, and I think it's, as you talk about the development process, it's worth mentioning, you know, like she was, as I said, spending 3 years working on that 3D animation of the Hanuman story, that narrative. And so she was obviously doing extensive research to build to this understanding. And she didn't start off with 26,000 bells. She started off with sketches and then prototypes using, I think it was like a couple thousand pearls on strings, making like a smaller scale version of it to work out the ideas, to work out the logistics before going to that larger scale and having, you know, it was obviously a team of artists working together to execute the final product. And I think they worked for days to do that every time it's been put up.
Yeah, I saw that one of her prototypes was, it was a 6-foot piece. And yeah, I think, I'm not sure if the 6-foot piece had the bells on it or pearls, but yeah, she scaled up and obviously was doing a lot of very particular research, you know, how she was going to structure this thing. And like you said, and I think that this is actually really a great point to bring up, is the collaboration for pieces like this. You know, I mean, it's analogous to a lot of other processes in art. You know, like if you're making an album, you're working with maybe a producer, a sound engineer, maybe you have a band, and it's not just one person. You know, art pieces like this require a team. And I think often we think about, the lonely obsessive artist, but it has to be a collaborative work, especially on that scale. And I think like that's another really beautiful part of this sculpture. Again, it's for like anyone could look at this and maybe enjoy it. And she had to work with other people. It's her vision, and other people helped her make it come to life. But like you said, she kind of scaled up, and you would have to, right? Like, Christo, like he had how many people helping him put up his installations? Those really big ones. You have to have others.
Oh yeah, and I do have to be the pedantic person and say Christo and Jean Claude, because it was a husband wife duo. It was a collaborative. But like one of them passed a few years before the other. But for most of those big things that people often shorthand as Christo, I always feel bad because it was Christo and Jean Claude.
What I'm thinking of specifically is the installation that was, outside and going through like a valley and some mountains. It was those big red sheets of fabric. Yeah. And who did that? Was that Christo or?
That was, I honestly couldn't tell you off the top of my head whether that was Christo or Christo and Jean Claude, because like I said, most of those installations were done with massive amounts of fabric, and most of them were a collaborative. But like I said, one passed before the other, so the later stuff I think was just Christo. But it was just because of the fact that we had talked about like acknowledging other people who contribute. And I think the other thing that I wanted to say about just acknowledging other contributions of other artists is Agrawal. It's not just the vision and like the hired assistants who put this together, but it like, I don't think she was designing the bells. So somewhere down the line, there was an industrial designer, and there were people working in factories that their work is often not recognized. But in some way, whenever we see these things that are put together with essentially like found objects, like there's a much broader collaboration happening,
Yeah.
that often goes unnoticed. And I always like to try to point that out, just because there are a lot of people creating things that are used and appropriated by other artists. And I think, we should give some credit to that as well.
I agree. I think it's one of the, most important, at least to me, I think one of the most important pieces of making art is the collaborative aspect of it, for a lot of different reasons. But, I'll never forget when I was younger, I was like writing music, and I was in a band, and I had this idea for this song, and the person that was playing drums in this group was like, what if we did this? And I felt myself getting like kind of upset about the suggestion, which I think I was taking as a criticism. And I was kind of, bristled at it. And then later he was like, part of being in a band is like sharing ideas and like shaping the end product. And you should just be curious and try it. Like, just try it and see, what comes from it. And hey, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it. But it was really pivotal, because I realized, I'm like, yeah, he's right. Like oftentimes it's really helpful to get another person's perspective. We think about that all the time in terms of like getting advice. You want a soundboard. Art, I don't think, is any different. It's really helpful to have other perspectives involved. And, I think this artist, going back to her, I mean, she clearly understands the value of that. And I think you have to have a level of humility and also intelligence to do that. I mean, really merging those two characteristics in order to get your end goal, created. And I think that's part of her brilliance is she's obviously brilliant and talented, and there's also a humility to her work, because it cannot be done by one person. And I mean, that's so cool to me.
Yeah, and I think you really encapsulated something really fundamental to the creative process in taking taking in feedback, taking in and considering other perspectives, being open to new ideas, to learning, to growth. Often there's this misperception of an artist as this solitary genius who has this vision and they know better than the critics, but really the best artists learn from, and whether they agree or disagree, they take in and listen with an open mind and consider all different viewpoints and all different ideas.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I mean, and I think for a lot of people, especially, I think when people are younger, and this adults are, I guess, also subject to this, is, there's a lot of ego in art. There's a lot of ego in music. There can be.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it's like begin as personal, creations stemmed from personal experiences and feelings. And so, often.
Well, we all have that fantasy that we'll put something out there and everybody will jaws will drop and people will celebrate it as the most amazing thing that has ever been made in the history of the world.
Oh, yeah. Isn't
Clearly,
it true?
once I make a painting, it is the first perfect painting in the history of the world.
Right? Clearly. I mean, yeah. And there's, I think, in art and in other professions too. I mean, I work at a law firm and I listen to attorneys talk all day, and they're really, really smart people. And one of the things that I've learned from them is, they can state a series of facts in the most complex manner you could think of, but at the end of the day, that's not going to help them reach their goal, which is to, succinctly state a series of facts that the majority of people can understand. And it's, art, it's interesting. We maybe have these really complex off the wall ideas, and we want other people to engage with it in the same way that we do. But that might not actually be the most effective way to do that, right? And so it's like, it's always, to the extent someone's goal is to have a little bit more of a universal experience for the listener or the viewer, that's really hard to achieve, right? But there are things we can do by listening to other people during like a workshop or critique that help us get there. And I mean, that's, again, another value of working with others. This artist, obviously, with the amount of research she did, she was constantly collecting information about really specific things and then putting it into a form that like all different kinds of people could enjoy. I mean, it's stunning. the process is stunning. The art is stunning. It's so cool.
I'm wrapping it up. I want just a 3-point rating scale. And where should this hang? The Louvre? Is this something to look at? The lab. Is this something to learn from? Or the Louvre? British for the bathroom.
Yeah.
There's a poop joke in there somewhere.
Oh, that's terrible. Well, I have a feeling I think I know what you're going to say, so I'll let you go first, and then I'll go if you want.
Oh, I always like to let the guest go first.
Noted. Okay. I mean, yeah, I think this would go in the Louvre.
Yeah, I fully agree. For all the reasons we've already talked about, like this is just, I think this is masterful because of the different layers to it. The fact that, your immediate gut reaction, even if you don't know anything about it, it's awe-inspiring because of the scale, because of the form of it, because of like just the neatness of execution and the sensory experience. And then as you learn more and as you linger, it takes on new meaning, and there's this meditative quality to it that I find very just soothing and enjoyable, but also to learn from. And that's what I feel like museum pieces are all about.
Yeah, everything you said I agree with, and the only thing that I could maybe add to that really awesome description that you just gave is that I think this piece would go really well in a museum that has, high foot traffic, because I think everyone has the ability to learn something from this piece or enjoy this piece or interact with this piece. I really think this is something that basically most people can get down with. And I think, but that's not to say that everybody would have the same experience. I just think that a lot of people would enjoy it and learn from it. And, I think that's what great art is.
Yeah, and that's funny though, because that's like the one thing I think I'm disagreeing with you about is the high foot traffic, because I feel like this is something that needs to be in a large, almost cavernous space that is calm, and like it to me it's funny because it feels so massive and overpowering, and yet it feels like the experience I want from it is more quiet and intimate, where it's just like me with that figure to be able to just like appreciate the stillness and then be enveloped by the sound and the sensory experience.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. It's,
like I see it like Kusama's Infinity Rooms in that sort of sense, where it's like just let people go in like one at a time for a few seconds,
Sure. So with the high foot traffic, I don't think I necessarily meant like everybody looking at it or trying to interact with it at the same time, but just in a place where a lot of people have access to it. Yeah, it would be great to be in a room alone with that. Are you kidding? That would be incredible.
Yeah, like I say, I think we both feel like everybody should see it.
Yeah.
Everybody should have access to it, but probably small groups at a time or something, is the best experience of it, because
that seems ideal.
There's just, yeah. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate your flexibility and your schedule and taking the time. It's always fun to talk to you, and especially to talk about an awesome work of art.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. This was so fun, and this is really cool that you're doing this.
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted. If you found this tolerable, please like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week in the show notes, on Twitter @WoodArtEd, and on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.